All right, guys. What I wanted to do for Studio is show you a few steps in terms of setting up views in your Rhino files. Hopefully you can start to use those as backdrops or guides for developing each drawing a little bit more detailed manually. But also you can get some slight shade and shadow just using a few of the tools that are available here. I'll show you how to set up the views, save the views, set up the sun, and export the images so you can use them in Photoshop. There's a follow-up to this. This hopefully will be a short tutorial. There'll be a follow-up using the same this same project that you're looking at right here, but walks through some of the steps in terms of how to layer various images together to create an overall reasonable rendering. One of the techniques there was using a clipping mask for some of that, and if you're just trying to get the line work, remember I didn't cover in that video that will follow this, and it's an older video, using the alpha channel just to get your line work. So you want to make sure to use that where it's appropriate, just to get your nice crisp line work on the overall image and layer. Okay, so this drawing has already been set up with a series of views. So I'll go here to set view. If I go down here, these are the basic ones that we have, the presets, but also there's named views. And then this window shows up. And so what this is nice is if you want to come back to a very particular view, you can do that in a way that's exact. You know, it's hard to, once you kind of get away from the view, it's hard to approximate. It's always going to be a little bit off. And so when you're starting to output and starting to base other drawings on a very particular view, it's really important to use these named views. So I'm going to delete all of these and start fresh. So if I want to set up the view, and right now I don't have anything, no objects selected right now. So I'm just kind of free orbiting around this. And again, I could select, let's see, everything is locked down. An object, and I can go here to my zoom selected, at least so I can orbit around something specific that's to the project, and I'm going to click off of that. So I can start to set up the view using my right click, shift, and perspective view is going to let me pan while I right click. And so I can start to set this up. If I'm also wanting to make sure that I'm at the right height, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult and things look very dramatic once you get a little bit lower, but it starts to be a little bit more unrealistic. So one thing that you can do, again, I don't have anything selected, is I can go into properties, and there are just some general camera angle bits of information. So I can go here to the location of the camera, so it has here the lens length. I can adjust that as opposed to using the lens length tool, rotation XYZ. So it's giving me all this location. Also what it's giving me is a Z location. So I want to make sure that I'm actually at a reasonable height of a person, as a person might view this, right? So I'm just going to type in 70 inches, and you can see it adjusted automatically. So now I know that I'm at a height that's reasonable for a person. Now if I want to change this view subtly, I want to make sure to maintain that, and if I start to orbit, I can just right click, hold it down, and orbit. So I'm going to be changing that Z. You can see that Z changing over there. If I hold my shift key down, it's going to maintain that 70-inch height in that direction. So I can make some adjustments while maintaining that particular height. Let's see. Okay. So say that's a view that I want to keep, that's reasonable. Maybe I'll just pan over a little bit. There we go. Then I can go into, my set views, and I can go then down to named views, and I can save this particular view, right? So it's going to save the camera, the lens length, it's going to save all that information. So it'll be exact to this particular angle. So I'll say save as, and I'll give it a name. You can see that's a previous name that I had here because it's the first one. Maybe I'll just call it ground one, especially if you're thinking about maybe including some bird's eye views or some other views or an interior view. This is a pavilion, so there's no interior or exterior, so I might distinguish it that way. But here, ground one is enough that I know it's a view that's on the ground and it's the first view, and I might select a few others. But I'm just going to select this one, so I'll say OK. So now no matter what I do, if I zoom around here, I can double click on this view and it'll bring me back to that. Another option to get to that same thing, you can zoom way away here. If I go back to this drop down by the viewport, set view, I can just select my ground one as the view and get right back there. So I don't need that dialog box open all the time. The other thing that's important to think about is the kind of information you want to get out of a file like this. This includes, this is an image that I used Flamingo with, but there's some other, so that had some materials and everything, but I didn't use very much of that. Most of this is very sort of subtle variations in opacity and reflectivity, or the specularity of the image. And so if you go again here to layer, and let's just say steel frame, and I'll select this, and these will automatically be white. That means there's no real material assigned, but once you click that, and this is on the lettering, there's some lettering that's associated with this. Here I have some basic controls for the material, right? So I could change the color here, whatever the color that you want. So I don't know, maybe a crazy blue. I wouldn't choose to go that crazy. Let's subdue that. There we go. I can also say that I want a glossed finish somehow, so more or less glossiness, reflectivity, so it's going to reflect other objects, images of other objects around it onto it, and transparency. So if I want it to be very transparent, like clear glass, maybe I would select, like, I don't know, 75–80% or something. If it was more translucent, maybe around 50. You have to kind of play around with it. So that's how you can change some subtle materiality. I don't recommend getting too heavy into this, and so I think this is enough to work with. The other thing that you want to be able to do in this view, let's get back to this, ground one, is if you're going to, there's a few ways you can get images out of Rhino. So one way you'd be able to render it. So if I go up into render settings, I'm going to right click on this render sphere. I have some control, Rhino render, and that's what the render that's selected right now. Custom, it's just basically this is the resolution of the screen that it's picking up on. So that's what it's set up to be right now. But I can change that, and I can lock the viewport aspect ratio if I just wanted that to be consistent. So I could bump this up to 2000 or 3000, so it'll be 2000 by 1058. Dots per inch you can also control, so it's going to be bigger or smaller. Anti-aliasing, you want to just bump that up to high. The rest of this, the default should be okay. You want a transparent background, the skylight you may or may not want on, and I'll show you where you can control the sun in just a bit here. But those are some basic settings. You don't have to play around with too many of these options. So just some really basic environmental settings. I'm not going to use a wallpaper. We're going to do that work in Photoshop, and background solid color. I guess that's what it's set at black right now, but I just want that to be nothing. Okay, so I'll say OK. And then you can go ahead and, that's the ghosted view, and render that. So if you just click render, it's going to start moving through that process. This could take a little while, but it's going to be factoring the position of the sun and everything. And right now my computer is not enjoying that. Okay, so I'm going to stop that. So you'd be able to save that as an image. Before you do that, I guess I jumped ahead a little bit. You want to position the sun. And for this, I'm actually going to change this view to artistic. So I want to see how the shadows are going to be working on this back surface here in this wall. And it's going to be different for your project, but it's something that you can monitor. So I'm going to click the little sun right here. Your probably default it'll be just off, right? So you just have some basic shadows there, but you can get a little bit more control there. Turn this on. You can decide whether or not to have the skylight on. That's kind of more of like a backlight. So if you want it to be a little bit more dramatic, you can use that, or if you wanted it to be a little bit more washed out, let's work with this for now. There's another building right here, and this is the southern side of the overall site, so there's going to be a lot of shadows cast on there. I think that's why I had the skylight highlighted. You can also choose the location. This project was in Milwaukee, and so that's what was selected here. You could try to select here, although when I've done that here in Moscow, it has selected Boise. But you could also just look up the latitude and longitude of where Moscow is, or whatever place that you are in, and type that in, and it's going to give you that location. So you could try this. It depends on what internet network that you're working on. Will give you. You can see, yeah, it shows Boise here, and I'm on the Ethernet. So that's close. But if you want to get, be more precise, of course, then you could adjust the latitude and the longitude. If you go up here, there are several other settings. So you can adjust the well, you can adjust the year. This is 2012, and that's going to be fine for now. But you can change the month. So during the summer, the spring, and the fall. So you can see all that changes for the same time of day. Let's say we are around, I don't know, September. The time of day, you can just start to move this so you can see how the shadows kind of change there subtly. So it's a matter of playing. This isn't necessarily exact because of the view. The render will be much more exact, but this, you don't necessarily have to go through that rendering process. You can achieve that in Photoshop as well. So you might just want to be able to export this image just as it is. So you might just want to work with this. And I would actually recommend that because I don't want you spinning your wheels too much, getting into materials over here. That could be a very long, tedious process. So I don't know, something that's kind of reasonable. And even in this case, if this was that much of a problem, I might be cropping this out anyway in the image. I might just turn off this building or hide this building so I get more dramatic shadows here. Want to not fudge it too much, but that's the general idea. Okay, so say that's okay. And then what you're able to do is take this, and in your standard view, you could just go ahead and print it. And you might need to adjust this depending, but this is based off of 11 by 17 or Ledger, so it fits into that view fairly well. You could select the vector output or the raster output. The raster is going to give you much more definition of the image and everything. You could decide to select the different color here. I tend to just use black and white and deal with tonality in Photoshop. It's a perspective in this case, so scale isn't really going to matter. Visibility, you can play around with what exactly you might see for that based off of all these settings. Printer details, right now it's set for a PDF, and so right now it's 1:1 scale based off 11 by 17, so that would be fine. You could also, it's a PDF, select an image, so you can go right to like a PNG if you wanted to. So same settings here, 300 dots per inch, 11 by 17. The printer is high quality, which is what you want. View the scale and output, it's all the same as the previous. So basically it's going to give you this as an image at 300 dots per inch, and that's a decent resolution to work with. So then you can just select print and select the location where you want that to be. In this case, I forgot where I was working. I think it's somewhere in here. Oh, no, because this is studio. I think it's in here. So you want to give it a name as well. What I oftentimes do will take a note for the time of day. So first I want to give it just like a timestamp of when I did it. So I'll say 17:04, and today's the 13th. Then I'll say this is view ground 1. I'll just say GR1. Then I might put in the time of day, so say it was 9 a.m. So then I know the sun setting as well, because that's going to matter if you have to come back and redo something. You want to make sure that you know that. So you can add a bit of that information there. Also, you might just want to add what it is. In this case, in the video that follows, I was using the difference between rendering this out with and without context, and whether it was these kinds of lines that we're seeing here or if it was more of a shaded render. So I might change this to, let's see, this would be, has everything in it, so I would call it all, and then it is the line work that I'm working with here. You're not going to have as much detail with yours, so a lot of the line work that will be added here, you'll be doing that by hand, right? Because chances are you're not going to get to this level of detail, not that this is all crazy detailed, but chances are you're not going to have time to just sit and model and then get it out, right? So, but you want a general idea, so even the general shape of this would have been fine. You can add a lot of this other information than just by drawing it by hand, and use this as again a kind of a baseline guide for developing that overall drawing. Let's see. The other thing that you could do, I guess you could, again, render it, and you would save that as something different. You could try to see what it would be like here as a rendered. See, this is all kind of crazy with some of the other settings that I have, so that doesn't quite work for this case. The regular render would probably be a little bit more reasonable. But again, a lot of the tonality and everything, you'd be able to achieve that in Photoshop. But this, I just wanted to concentrate on how you're able to take some images, some idea of shade and shadow, some idea for line work, use that to print out and develop further by hand, but also using it in Photoshop with the other layers that will be in this follow-up video. So that's it for this one, and I think that should do it. So when the requirement here for the project asks that you're working with manual drawing, so you can use this as a baseline and then develop it by hand, so pencil on tracer would have you, that they are all manual digital hybrids with line weights, shade, shadow, poche, entourage, and then composed on the overall illustration. So the hybrid is really your hand drawing over something like this, so you can add detail. And then the muted context and entourage is, or context imagery as it describes it there, is really like people, trees, even the sky, if you're going to bring in a sky, which you should play around with doing, to make sure that it doesn't overtake the intention of this, that doesn't overtake the idea that it's about this space, it's about this piece of architecture, it's about, in your case, the project that you're working on. So what I have done before is output it the way it is right now, so that was all. I would also output it, and here I have some of the context on separate layer. I can just turn all of that off and that would output it just by itself. So I have that as a separate layer that can be in front of the layer with all the context and everything. And in this case, I would call it, for saving this, it is not all, and it's a terminology that you decide to use. I just use solo. So that just means to me, it's just the intervention. Doesn't have a lot of context or no context around it, and it's basically the lines that I'm getting out of it. So I would save that separately. Okay, well, I think that does it for this. Follow these steps in addition to the follow-up video that I'll send a link out for, and we will take it from there. Thanks, guys.